The first music mistake most people make is assuming disrespect starts with someone else's attitude. Music, it doesn't. Disrespect starts the moment people discover that your standards can be negotiated long before anyone interrupts you, dismisses your opinion, or treats you as unimportant. They've already been studying you. Human beings are constantly picking up on silent signals. They notice what you tolerate, what you music forgive, what you excuse, and how badly you crave acceptance. The uncomfortable truth is this: people rarely disrespect confidence first. They disrespect permission, music, and permission is often granted without a single word being said. Robert Greene returns to one principle again, and music again throughout his work. Power is rooted in perception. Before people challenge your authority, music, they gauge your self-worth. If they sense your confidence depends on their approval, they know they have leverage over you. But when they meet someone who values themselves regardless of outside validation, the psychological game changes. Music, suddenly, disrespect becomes risky because they no longer control the outcome. This is why self-respect isn't merely a personal virtue. It's a strategic weapon. It quietly communicates that there are consequences for crossing your boundaries. Not consequences born of anger or revenge, but consequences born of your willingness to walk away, withdraw your attention, or remove your presence entirely. People fear losing access to those who refuse to tolerate disrespect far more than they fear loud displays of aggression. Look closely at the people who naturally command respect wherever they go. They aren't constantly proving themselves. They aren't chasing recognition. They don't interrupt conversations just to be noticed. In fact, they often speak less than everyone else. Yet, when they do speak, people listen. Why? Because their behavior tells the room one undeniable truth: my value doesn't depend on your opinion. Music, that quiet certainty, creates psychological pressure. Others become careful because they realize music, this person can be manipulated through approval, guilt, or intimidation. Now music, compare that to someone who's constantly seeking acceptance. They laugh at jokes made at their expense. Music, they apologize for things that need no apology. They change their opinions to avoid disagreement. They overlook repeated disrespect because they're afraid of losing relationships. At first, people may appreciate their kindness, but over time, appreciation turns into familiarity. Familiarity turns into entitlement, and entitlement eventually becomes disrespect. Human nature rarely protects what comes without conditions. The uncomfortable reality is that every time you let someone cross a line without responding, music, you redraw that line farther away. People learn through patterns, not promises. If your actions keep telling them your boundaries are flexible, music, they stop treating those boundaries as real, and soon they start testing you in bigger ways. Not necessarily because they hate you, music, but because they've learned there's no real cost to doing so. This is where most people make another mistake. They believe respect is earned by being agreeable, but history, leadership, and psychology all say otherwise. People admire kindness, but they respect standards. Someone without standards might be liked for a moment, music's, yet they're rarely taken seriously. The person who calmly protects their dignity, music, even when it creates discomfort, becomes unforgettable. They build a reputation that travels ahead of them. Others start thinking twice, music, before crossing someone who's already shown they've been. Never trade their self-respect for temporary approval. Notice that genuine self-respect never needs to announce itself. It doesn't rely on threats, emotional outbursts, or constant reminders of status. Those behaviors usually expose insecurity. Real confidence is quiet music because it has nothing to prove. It understands that walking away from disrespect, music, is often more powerful than winning an argument. Silence, distance, and consistency become forms of strength that people can't easily challenge. The paradox is simple. The less desperately you chase respect, the more naturally it comes to you. The moment people realize your identity isn't for sale, your principles aren't negotiable, and your dignity can't be bought with attention or approval, they start treating you differently, not because you demanded respect, music, but because they understand that disrespecting you will cost them access to someone who knows their own worth. And once that unshakable foundation is built, the next step is learning to make every word carry enough weight, music, that people think twice before crossing you again. Once you've built unshakable self-respect, the next challenge is making sure people recognize it without you ever having to announce it. This is where most people fail. Music, they believe authority comes from talking more, explaining every decision, music now, or winning every argument. But in reality, the more desperate you are to be understood, the less powerful you appear. Every unnecessary explanation reveals something deeper. It suggests you need other people's permission to feel justified. And the moment people sense that need, they realize they have influence over you. Powerful people understand a principle most others overlook. Words are valuable only when they're scarce. The person who talks endlessly gives everyone access to their thoughts, emotions, and intentions. There's no mystery left, no uncertainty. Music, and once people fully understand you, they also learn how to predict you. Predictable people are music easy to manipulate. Others know exactly which buttons to press, which criticisms will provoke you, and which compliments will win you over. Robert Greene often emphasizes that mystery creates power. The less people know about your inner world, music, the more carefully they have to approach you. Human beings naturally fear what they can't fully predict. This is why the quiet person in a room often draws more attention than music, the loudest one. While everyone else competes to be heard, the silent observer is gathering information, watching personalities, weaknesses, ambitions, and emotions unfold without revealing their own hand. In every social interaction, information is power. Whoever reveals less usually holds more. Think about someone who feels compelled to defend themselves the moment they criticized. Before the other person even finishes speaking, they're already explaining their intentions, listing excuses, trying to prove they were misunderstood. Their words might be logical, but psychologically they communicate insecurity. Their music tells others, "Your opinion affects me enough that I have to convince you." Now compare that to someone who listens calmly, responds only when necessary, and doesn't feel obligated to justify every decision. Their music silence creates uncertainty. People start questioning themselves instead, wondering whether their criticism even landed. That uncertainty quietly shifts the balance of power. This doesn't mean going cold or refusing to communicate. It means becoming intentional. Every sentence should have a purpose. Every opinion should add value. People naturally respect those whose words carry weight. Music, because they know those words are never wasted. Picture two leaders walking into a meeting. One dominates every conversation, interrupts constantly, and talks just to fill silence. The other listens carefully, lets everyone else reveal their thinking first, then offers only a few precise observations. Which one leaves the stronger impression? More often than not, it's the second. Their restraint creates authority because people instinctively link control over speech with control over emotion. Silence also protects you from one of the biggest dangers in human interaction, revealing music your weaknesses too soon. Every unnecessary complaint, emotional reaction, or impulsive confession hands others information they may eventually use against you. Not everyone has bad intentions, music, but human nature remembers vulnerability. In moments of competition, conflict, music, or disagreement, people often reach for whatever gives them an edge. The less ammunition you hand over, the harder you become to challenge. There's another psychological effect silence creates. It forces others to fill the empty space. Most people are uncomfortable with silence, so they start talking, revealing secrets, opinions, fears, and motives without even realizing it. While they expose themselves, you stay composed, quietly collecting insight. Over time, this habit lets you understand people far better than they understand you. That imbalance of knowledge naturally commands respect. Remember, speaking less doesn't mean thinking less. It means music replacing impulsive reactions with deliberate responses. It means choosing influence over attention, strategy over emotion, presence over noise. When every word you say is measured, people stop listening for quantity and start listening for meaning. Eventually, they realize that if you've chosen to say something, it's probably worth hearing. And once your words start carrying that kind of weight, the next step is making your boundaries impossible to ignore. Speaking less gives your words value, but words alone are never enough. Music, if people discover your limits only exist in conversation and not in action, music, they'll eventually stop taking either your words or your silence seriously. This is why boundaries are the real test of authority. They separate people who merely ask for respect from those who naturally command it. Every boundary you set sends a message, but every boundary you fail to enforce sends an even louder music one. Human nature pays attention to actions, not declarations. If your behavior contradicts your standards, people will always believe the behavior. One of the biggest illusions is thinking disrespect happens all at once. It rarely does. It usually starts small, a sarcastic remark left unanswered, a promise broken more than once, someone who keeps interrupting you, a friend who only reaches out when they need something, a coworker who takes credit for your work. These moments may seem minor, but psychology works through music patterns. When people cross a small line without consequence, they get curious about where the next line sits. Every successful test invites another one. Over time, what started as a small act of disrespect becomes a habit because you unknowingly taught them your boundaries were optional. Robert Greene often explores how power gets built through consistency. People quickly learn who can be pressured and who can't. Music, they watch whether your principles shift depending on who's standing in front of you. If you only hold firm when music is convenient, your boundaries lose credibility. But when your standards stay the same, regardless of status, music popularity, or circumstance, people start adjusting their behavior before they even interact with you. Music, your reputation starts doing the work your words no longer have to do. Music, many people avoid setting boundaries because they're afraid others won't like them. But that fear creates an even bigger problem. The desire to be liked often turns into an invitation to be used. The more you prioritize keeping everyone comfortable, the more uncomfortable your own life becomes. Eventually, you find yourself surrounded by people who respect your usefulness, but not your worth. They appreciate what you do for them, yet never hesitate to cross your limits because they've learned your need for approval outweighs your commitment to yourself.
Music.
The strongest boundaries aren't emotional. They're calm, predictable, and consistent. Picture someone who keeps speaking to you disrespectfully. The average person reacts with anger, argues, music, and threatens consequences they never follow through on. The powerful person does something music different. They stay composed. They don't raise their voice or seek payback. Instead, they quietly change their behavior. They reduce access, stop giving unnecessary attention, and if the disrespect continues, they remove themselves entirely. This response carries far more psychological weight because it proves your standards are real. No drama, just consequences. People often mistake this for coldness, but it's actually a form of self-respect. You're not punishing anyone. You're music protecting your own dignity. And there's an important difference. Punishment is driven by emotion. Boundaries are driven by principle. The moment people realize your decisions are guided by music principle rather than fleeting feelings, they start taking every interaction with you more seriously. Another reason boundaries earn respect is that they remove uncertainty. People know exactly where they stand with you. They understand honesty is rewarded, manipulation is ignored, and repeated disrespect leads to distance. That consistency builds trust music even among people who disagree with you. Ironically, people often respect someone with firm boundaries more than someone who tries to please everyone because predictable strength feels safer than unpredictable weakness. There's also a hidden psychological effect at work. Music, when someone loses access to your time, attention, or presence because they cross the line, they start associating disrespect with music loss. That lesson lands harder than any lecture or argument ever could. Human beings remember consequences far longer than they remember conversations.
Music.
Once that association forms, they naturally grow more careful in future interactions. Never forget that every relationship music teaches people how to treat you. Every compromise, every reaction, every decision becomes part of that lesson. If your boundaries collapse under pressure, your authority collapses with them. But if your standards hold firm, even when tested, people eventually realize disrespect music simply isn't worth the cost. And once your boundaries become impossible to ignore, the next level of power comes from mastering your emotions when others try to provoke you. By now, you've built self-respect, learned to speak with intention, and set boundaries people can no longer ignore. But there's one final test music that decides whether all of that is real or just an illusion. It happens in the moments when someone deliberately tries to provoke you. They criticize music you publicly. They question your authority. They insult you, hoping to drag you into an emotional reaction. In that music moment, your biggest enemy isn't the person in front of you. It's your own emotions. Whoever controls your emotions controls you. And the moment someone can predict your reactions, they can start steering your behavior. This is one of the oldest principles music of power. People often assume strength means dominating others, but real strength is dominating yourself. Robert Greene repeatedly music points out that emotional reactions cloud judgment. Anger, frustration, and wounded pride create blind music spots that sharp opponents can easily exploit. Whoever stays calm while everyone else loses control quietly gains the advantage, because their music keep thinking while everyone else is reacting. Think about how easily people can expose your weaknesses once they know exactly what sets you these off. If a single insult is enough to break your composure, they found your weak spot. They no longer need intelligence or strategy, just the same trigger, repeated whenever they want to throw you off. Every emotional outburst music becomes proof that your behavior can be controlled from the outside, instead of directed from music within. This is why truly powerful people rarely react right away. Music, they know every emotional response gives away valuable information. Anger music exposes insecurity. Defensiveness exposes fear. Desperation exposes music dependence on approval. Even too much excitement can reveal your intentions before the right moment. The calmer you stay, the less you give away. Silence protects your strategy. Emotional reactions expose music it. Picture two people facing the exact same insult. One instantly argues, raises their voice, and spends the next several minutes trying to prove the other person wrong. Everyone watching remembers the argument, but they also remember who lost control. The other person listens without interrupting, pauses, and either responds with a few calm words or chooses not to respond at all. That silence creates discomfort. Suddenly, the attention shifts away from the insult and toward the person who refused to be music shaken. Instead of looking weak, they look impossible to manipulate. Music, this doesn't mean suppressing emotions or pretending they don't. Every human feels anger, disappointment, music, and frustration. The difference is what happens between feeling and acting. Powerful music people create space between the two. They let emotions settle before making decisions. That music brief pause often prevents mistakes that emotional people spend years trying to undo. There's another psychological reason music emotional control earns respect. Most people expect predictable reactions. Anger after an insult, panic under pressure, fear when challenged. When you don't react the expected way, you introduce uncertainty. Music uncertainty makes people cautious. They start wondering what you're thinking, what your next move will be, whether provoking you was actually a mistake. That uncertainty alone can discourage future disrespect because people hesitate to challenge someone they can't read emotionally. Zagat history repeatedly shows that great leaders, skilled negotiators, and influential people share this trait. They don't let temporary emotions dictate permanent decisions. Music, they understand every emotional explosion gives away power that may never come back. Music staying composed isn't passive, it's strategic. It lets you choose your response instead of letting someone else choose it for you. Maybe the biggest advantage of emotional discipline is that it protects your reputation. People eventually forget arguments, but they rarely forget composure. Over time, they start associating you with stability, music confidence, and self-control. They realize intimidation, insults, and manipulation simply don't work on you. Once that reputation sets in, many conflicts end before they even start, because people instinctively look for easier targets. In the end, people music don't fear the loudest person in the room. They fear the one who can't get emotionally controlled. Once others realize they can't provoke you into a mistake, they lose one of their most powerful weapons. And once your emotions are fully under your own control, the next step is becoming so valuable that people fear losing your presence more than they value disrespecting music you. Once you're emotionally unshakable, you reach a point where arguments no longer define your power. But there's music another level that makes people think twice before ever disrespecting you. And music isn't your words, and it isn't your temper, it's your value. Human nature runs on a simple principle. Music people protect what they're afraid of losing. If your presence is common, your attention unlimited, and your time available to anyone at any moment, people slowly start taking you for granted. Familiarity without value breeds indifference, and indifference is often where disrespect begins. This is why powerful people never make themselves endlessly available. They understand attention is one of the most valuable resources they have. Every minute you hand out carelessly tells people your time isn't worth much. Robert Greene often illustrates that scarcity increases perceived value. Throughout music history, the rare has always been prized above the ordinary. The same applies to human behavior. The person who's always around often gets overlooked, while the person whose presence has to be earned naturally commands greater respect. Many people mistakenly believe constant availability makes them more important. They answer every message instantly, cancel their own priorities for others, and stay accessible no matter how they're treated. At Music First, this can look generous, but over time, people start expecting it instead of appreciating it. What was once seen as kindness becomes obligation the moment you fail to meet that expectation. Music, the same people who benefited from your availability may get frustrated. Music, not because you did anything wrong, but because they'd grown used to unlimited access. Look at the people who hold real influence in any environment. They aren't hard to reach because they're music arrogant. They're selective because they understand the value of focus. Music. Their attention goes where it matters most. They protect their energy from unnecessary distractions. That selectiveness music creates an invisible psychological effect. Others start valuing every interaction knowing it isn't handed out freely. Respect grows when access has to be earned rather than assumed. But becoming valuable is about far more than limiting your availability. The greatest source of value is ongoing personal growth. Skills, knowledge, discipline, confidence, and reliability are assets that can't be easily replaced. The more you keep improving yourself, the harder you become to ignore. People may disrespect empty titles or fleeting success, but they hesitate to disrespect real competence. Deep down, they understand that someone who consistently creates value has options. And people with options are never easily controlled. This is why chasing attention is such a risky habit. Attention can be given today and taken away tomorrow. Real value is different. Music, it exists whether people notice it or not. If your confidence depends on applause, music compliments, or social approval, your power vanishes the moment those things do. Music, but when your confidence comes from your abilities and character, outside opinions lose their power to define you. Others sense that independence and it changes how they treat you almost immediately. Another important lesson is learning to walk away from situations that no longer respect your music value. Many people stay in unhealthy friendships, jobs, or relationships simply out of fear of being alone. That fear weakens their position. When others sense you believe you have nowhere else to go, they know you're unlikely to leave no matter how you're treated. But the moment they understand you are genuinely ready to walk away rather than music accept disrespect, the balance of power shifts suddenly, that they power the ones worried about losing something valuable. None of this requires manipulation or arrogance. It isn't about pretending to be unavailable or acting superior. It's about building a life meaningful enough that you're no longer desperate for anyone's as validation. Your purpose, discipline, and standards become more important than temporary approval. Ironically, music, the less desperately you chase people's attention, the more willingly they give it to you. The people most respected are rarely the ones demanding importance. They tick music in the ones whose absence gets felt the moment they leave. Their value speaks before they do, and music, their presence is appreciated because it's never wasted. When people realize they could lose access to someone who genuinely enriches their lives, disrespect becomes a risk they're no longer willing to take. And after building that kind of value, the final step is making sure your actions create a strong enough that people think twice, music, before ever testing your character. By this point, you've learned that respect starts with yourself, grows through disciplined speech, gets protected by firm boundaries, strengthened by emotional control, and reinforced by becoming genuinely valuable. But none of it matters if music stays an idea instead of a habit. In the end, people don't judge you by what you claim to believe. They judge you by what you repeatedly do. Your reputation isn't built from your intentions. It's built from your actions. And once a reputation is established, it starts speaking before you even enter the room. Robert Greene often explores one timeless truth about power. People, music, trust patterns more than promises. Anyone can claim to be confident. Anyone can say they deserve respect. Anyone can talk about loyalty, discipline, music, or strength. But words fall apart the moment reality contradicts them. If someone repeatedly watches you compromise your standards under pressure, your reputation shifts one way. Music, if they consistently see you hold to your principles, even when it costs you something, your reputation shifts in the opposite music direction. Over time, people stop questioning who you are because your actions have already answered it. This is why consistency is one of the most underrated forms of power. Most people are only predictable in their inconsistency. Confident when things are easy, insecure when challenged. They enforce boundaries with some people and let others slide. They talk about discipline while repeatedly breaking promises to themselves. This inconsistency breeds doubt, and where doubt exists, respect starts to fade. People naturally test individuals whose behavior shifts with convenience, music, because they sense the uncertainty underneath. Now picture someone who behaves differently, whose standards stay the same no matter who they retry music talking to. They're respectful without being submissive, calm without being passive, confident without seeking attention. They keep their word even when no one's watching. Day after day, their actions reinforce the same message. And eventually, something remarkable happens. People, music, stop testing them because experience has already taught them the outcome. Their reputation becomes a quiet warning that disrespect, music, will never pay off. One of the biggest mistakes people make is protecting their image instead of building their character. Image depends on what people think today. Character determines what they'll think tomorrow. You can spend years carefully managing appearances, but a single moment of weak character can shatter that illusion. Real influence is built differently through hundreds of small decisions that align with your values until those decisions become your identity. At that point, respect isn't something you ask for anymore. It becomes something people naturally associate with your name. There's also a powerful psychological principle behind reputation. Human beings rely on past experience to predict future behavior. If someone has consistently shown confidence, discipline, and integrity, people expect those qualities to continue. They hesitate to act disrespectfully in music because previous interactions have already taught them there will be consequences. Not dramatic anger-driven consequences, but calm, predictable ones rooted in principle. The expectation shapes behavior before conflict even starts. This is why the strongest people rarely need to defend themselves. Their reputation does it for them. Others have already watched how they respond under pressure. They've seen them walk away from manipulation, refuse to tolerate disrespect, and stay composed in difficult moments. Those memories become part of their identity in music other people's minds. Over time, people start treating them with more care, not out of traditional fear, but because their character has already proven music that crossing them simply isn't worth it. Remember, every conversation, every decision, music, and every challenge adds to the story people tell about you when you're not around. You may never hear those conversations, but they shape your opportunities, your relationships, and the level of respect you receive. That's why every action matters. Every promise you keep strengthens your reputation. Every standard you protect reinforces your authority. Every moment of discipline adds another layer to the image others carry of you. In the end, making people think twice before disrespecting you was never about intimidation, aggression, or forcing anyone into submission. It's about becoming the kind of person whose self-respect is unwavering, whose words carry weight, whose boundaries hold firm, music whose emotions stay under control, whose value is undeniable, and whose actions build a reputation that speaks louder than any argument ever could. Once you reach that point, music respect stops being something you chase. It becomes something people choose to give because they understand your character leaves them no other reason to do otherwise.